Hi, Richie.
Hey, Faith. Once.
I know it's a new platform. I feel like every time they join, they're like, I got to get all my settings right.
Well, I was like, yeah, it'll be on Zoom probably, so I'll have my back white. I won't need to worry about what's behind me.
Yeah. Well, what is behind you?
This is a carpet pool. You ever heard of carpet pool?
No, but is it like what's the thing?
It's similar to shuffleboard.
Yeah.
It's with carpet or with pool balls. So you set them up, use the white ball, and roll it down and throw. It's an old camp game.
That's fun. This is your basement?
It is, yes.
Very fun. I wish I had room for carpet pool and other games. Instead, I have this is my dining room, and I have a bathroom vanity right next to me.
Yeah, I will say my wife wasn't too pumped when I built it, because it is massive, and at times I'm like, I wish I just would have been done.
Well, it looks nice, at least as a background for a podcast. So
yeah, it's a piece of wood. It'll work.
I'm actually very excited about this. I mean, it's fun to have these conversations with everybody, but I feel like I don't know anything about where you were before coming to Gun. So I'm really stoked about that. But I guess let's start with just introduce yourself, Richie.
Yeah, so I'm Richie Clark. I've been a developer at Gun now for 2 years. Came to the platform probably 3 or 4 years ago and used Gun to land a job, and then came on full time. I was contract full time for about 1.5 years, and then a couple months ago came on full time. Nice. W-2 technically. So
love that W-2. Makes taxes so much easier.
Oh my so God. Much better. Yes.
Well, that's also interesting. We should talk about that too. And you're based in Minnesota.
Minnesota. Yep. Based in the Twin Cities area.
Is it snowing yet?
We had snow. It's been warm now, and we're not going to be back to snow tomorrow. So
also, every new city I go to, I ask, I'm like, oh, is this the Twin City? Because, like most city airports are like, it's such and such and such and such. Like, it's all kind of together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Minnesota is the real Twin City.
Yeah, Minneapolis, St. Paul is the real Twin Cities.
Okay. And St. Paul is also in Minnesota.
Yeah, so Minneapolis and then St. Paul, they basically join now. So you cross over. But St. Paul is the capital of Minnesota. Minneapolis is the bigger city, I believe, population-wise. And so they're twin cities.
It's a really good trivia question. Right, if someone said, what's the capital of Minnesota, I would have said Minneapolis.
Yeah, pretty much everyone would.
So now I know. Yeah, I'll win thanks to you.
Poor St. Paul.
And okay, so technically I think the job post that you responded to for Gun was for like a UX developer, right?
Yeah, it was the same post Regis did, which, by the way, you should have just done another episode with Regis. You got to give the people what they want.
It broke YouTube. I don't know what. Everyone loves Regis.
I know. I'm telling you, should have just done a take 2 with Regis. Yeah, I applied for, I think it was UX. It was basically a heavy leaning front-end developer that knew Vue. And I had been working with Vue since its creation. I went to a talk in the Twin Cities with the founder of Vue, Evan Yu, and really was like, this guy's so smart.
Yeah.
So basically had started implementing Vue when I could in projects since then.
Cool.
So
it's always fun to hear people have been working with something since it was created, because I feel like you're the ones who read job posts that are like, must have 20 years of experience with Vue. And you're like, that's baloney.
I'm like, oh, it didn't exist 20 years ago. That's pretty funny. Cool. So,
and now obviously you do a lot more than UX development. What does like a typical day in the life of Richie Clark look like?
I've done a lot of tagging with Gray. Gray kind of getting the whole, product realm, and kind of having some back and forth with him and trying to move the product forward, mainly on the front end, because now, Regis has hit that middle ground. Steve was brought in does a lot of the back end, and Wade does a lot of the back end. So I've mostly just stayed right in the front end. When I first came on, it was like we had some bootstrap that needed to be pulled out because it wasn't quite implemented right. And then the next wave was like we reskinned the site from that blue gray to this kind of black tone. And then it did Hunter, which is our kind of internal
like search
process. Yeah, search for talent and companies and candidates and all that jazz. And now just kind of continuing to tweak the product as we go.
You're really like, I would say, straddling product and development. Like you have a lot of user facing conversations, and in your world, users are the internal team at Gun is mostly what you're thinking
about. Mainly. I mean, that's kind of been where I've had my bread and butter over my career. Is the best projects I've done have been for internal teams or people that I directly interact with to try and make their lives better as day to day. Cause most jobs are some kind of customer service, customer relations. And so in order to make those kind of conversations easier, better, make people not have to deal with so much additional stress, hopefully from the app is kind of where I enjoy and see the most reward back. So that's kind of when I do a lot of work, it's generally trying to do staff tools or something like that.
That's a good segue. As I mentioned, I have no idea where you were before this. So like walk me through your career. Has it always been kind of this path, or were you like Wade and a professional water skier before that?
I was not a professional water skier. It was not.
That's a bummer. That would be like a fascinating data story. How did we land the
two water skiers? Yeah. I have a cab. My mom's originally from Canada, and so we have she had a cabin up in Canada. So I have water skied, but not in any realm of professional.
Bummer.
I went to college for it was technically called a music ministry degree, which basically meant it was half religion, half music.
Did you go to Belmont?
I did not. I went to Northwestern in Northwest Iowa, small little school. So I graduated with that in 2010, which basically there was like no jobs in 2010 for anything. And what I always say was I just gotten married and my wife was going to school up here. So it also limited kind of the scope of where I could apply for things. And I applied for like everything. And I remember applying for a senior living home to wash dishes, and I like didn't even get a call back. Like and I was like, oh no, if I cannot even wash dishes, what in the world am I going to do? And so I was just applying to everything. I had a computer science minor and had done a couple computery things, I would say. And so I was applying and applied to a company called Treefort, who at the time was doing had a web application for they call it Minnesota Youth Athletic Services, MYAS, and it's like this. It's youth sports, building like these tournaments and registrations and brackets, and it was kind of this custom system they had built, and they were looking for someone to work with them. And I love sports. I have a coaching certificate degree too, and so it was kind of a fit there. And so I emailed the guy. And he was like, "Oh, I think you're a great fit. Come on in." And I got there, and it was like he was just I just remember him being like, "Can you show me anything else that you've done? Like anything? Like I don't care what it is. Just show me something that you've done." And I had like one small little website that I had done at the time, and it was basically he finally gave me. He was like, "Okay, let's do this. I'll hire you, and every 4 weeks we'll meet, and I'll either give you a raise or I'll fire you." And I was like, awesome, let's do that. Because sometimes you just need someone to believe in you and an opportunity to do something. So I was like, I love it. Let's do it. So I did. I came in, worked on Minnesota Youth Athletic Services. And then they also did the Windmark brands. So Once Upon a Child, Played Against Sports, Music Go Round, Style Encore.
Oh, cool.
So they did their corporate websites and all their franchisee websites. And then we were just like a normal dev shop too. So we had a bunch of just kind of side. He had like a bunch of golf courses that he had done and some random development places. And so I kind of worked through that. And so that first year, then in the spring, one of the other, it was basically like it was a small company. It was like 6 of us. And one of the other devs had another project that he was working on. And so they were like, hey, you have to build this new version of, I think it was Once Upon a Child, I think at the time. And I was like, oh, okay, like this, I'm like 4 months into this. Like I still am just, drinking from a fire hydrant. So I got to do that, which then like jump started having a lot of responsibility and learning a lot and kind of growing. So I was at that company for 8 years with them, and about halfway, probably a couple of years in, he started a secondary company called Screen Feed, which I transitioned to fully, and that was doing digital.
So safe to say at your 4-week meetings, you hadn't been fired yet.
I hadn't been
Nice.
fired yet, luckily.
Cool.
Yes, I was able to stick around. And so he started Screen Feed, which was digital signage content, and I did a lot of UI work for them and a lot of the front end, a lot of animations. If you walk into a bank and you see a TV screen and it's like, could be news, it could be a ticker on the bottom, it could be a video playing, like any of that could be powered by Screen Feed. And so Screen Feed's very large still and is in like the most random places. I was driving on the Ohio Turnpike or Indiana Turnpike and stopped at a random rest station and I was like, oh, that's a Screen Feed content. I was like, oh, that's, or you go to an airport and you're like, oh, that's Screen Feed. And I did pretty much every product release that they did for probably 3 or 4 years, doing the front end kind of graphic-y. We used to do Flash back in the day, files, because digital signage boxes are so old, and then generate images off of graphics or off of data and HTML files. And then we also did video. So I did kind of all that front end work, and then kind of my claim to fame there was I built a system called Content Cloud where we were producing like a minute, 30-second, we called them news bites. And it was one story that we pulled in content from. And so they were doing it in After Effects, and we brought it into the browser and kind of connected all with our partners, with Getty and Reuters, and they would search for their images, search for the video, crop it or cut the video into certain segments, rearrange it, pick the template, do a voiceover, upload it in, and then just click the button to generate. And then it would go on the back and it would generate all of this and upload. And so like that's kind of where the staff tools, like I talked before, was a big thing, because like that was the first time where it was like they went from doing 3 a day to 6.5 a day. And so like their lives were significantly better just because they didn't have to spend so much time.
How many years in
so that was kind of like,
did that like it seems like when you're recounting this story, you went from 0 to 100 real fast, just in terms of like ability to build this stuff. Like how many years in were you when you developed Content Cloud?
I think it was probably 5. I think we tried at 4, and there was a couple things that we couldn't quite do yet. And so then it was 5. But I give a lot of credit to where we worked, was just the responsibility and the ownership and opportunities of being able to, like you say, 4 years in, kind of being able to do some of those things, or even do a major brand website, 6 months into development, with people over watching and seeing, but still putting the onus on you is pretty remarkable, and definitely, set me on a trajectory way different than had I been in a, Fortune 50 company where I was just another kind of dev trying to do small little items or, whatnot. So
like finding that initial role that allowed you to be a little bit more of like a T-shaped dev, like focus on learn a whole bunch of stuff. I'm curious about that too. Like you went from having done some computery things, which in the show notes, we should like talk about what those are, because I too have done computery things, but I certainly could not be a junior dev. But you went from that to, 1, 2, 3 years in, being a real junior developer. And so I'm curious about like how do you think you were able to develop professionally in that world? Like, was it mostly through mentorship? Were you doing a lot of stuff kind of on your own time to learn? What did that look like?
It was a lot of just learning on my own at the beginning, because so they were a .NET shop,
Mm,
and at the time .NET there was classic ASP, there was .NET Web Forms, and then there had just released .NET MVC, and of course the MYS application was in classic ASP. A bunch of the normal sites that we did was in Web Forms, and then the new ones we were building were in MVC. So not only had I not done any of it, but I had to learn the three different kind of syntax and ways to do it. And so I can just remember like these, those old school, O'Neilly books or O'Reilly books, or any, like 500 pages of like flipping through and sitting there at my desk, just like, okay, going through. And so I think the easiest part of development is when you have practical tasks to do.
right.
And so it was like, hey, go change this or go change that. And, it becomes less theoretical and more like practical. So,
Right. That's why our generation knew HTML, was because that's how you change your MySpace.
exactly.
No one knew that we were learning HTML. We were just like, we want this song to play by Dashboard Confessional when you get to this part of my MySpace page.
Right. And so when you have practical things, you don't need to know every last thing about everything. And so it makes the world a lot smaller. And I think that's kind of almost, when you think of like project managers and like Gray, thinking of the scope of the entire app, it's that ability to practically then funnel it into a small little task that then adds up into a big scope of knowledge or big scope of app or whatever it is. And so that's kind of, I think those were the two things. It was just, a pure read as much as you can, learn as much as you can, look at the previous code that's been done and start to like navigate through how it's working. But then also they did a good job of like, do this task, do this small task. Okay, now do this one, and then ask questions if you don't know how to do it. And I think, my problem's always been asking questions, because the worst part about being a junior dev is asking a senior dev a dumb question and they answer in like 2 seconds, and they're like, you could have just figured that out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, should have just spent another 20 minutes. So it's like, I'm like the half a day, full day person. And then it's like, okay, if I've done it a full day and I still can't, then maybe I should ask. But really, in college, I didn't take any web classes. In high school, I didn't take a web class. I was in typing, and I was finishing fast enough that I read through the HTML book, but I don't think I ever had a proper training in web developments,
So it's all on the job, doing stuff for Play It Again Sport. I went to my first Play It Again Sports 2 weekends ago, by the way, and I was completely just shook by the whole operation. That's so cool.
It's a whole new realm.
It's so cool. My boyfriend is very into disc golf, which is just like classic white Jewish boy activities. But there's so many discs. I think you looked at every single one. Okay, so that's like maybe like chapter 1, first 5 years, you develop this really cool content cloud that's kind of like the peak so far professionally. In between kind of then and now, are there any highlights?
I don't know about highlights.
Or lowlights, I don't know.
I left, sure. Yeah, I left ScreenFeed in I don't even know now, 2017. Basically, my father-in-law works for a pork company and does logistics of like transporting the pigs. When are they ready to go to market, that sort of thing. And
pork. I thought you said port. Okay.
Pork.
Cool. That's different than port wine.
No, sorry.
Got it.
It is, yes. PORK, bacon. So when we had family meals and whatnot, we would kind of talk about it, and they were using an old Access database, and when they started going remote, they were like, it was like crashing all the time. And I was like, there's just got to be a better way. There has to be software somewhere that does logistics for the pork industry, and there wasn't really. And so we talked about like what it would look like if I did something like that. And so then they have a World Pork Expo in
Obviously,
Iowa.
It's in Iowa.
People come, obviously in Iowa. I'm from Iowa originally,
it makes
too.
Sense.
So
it
it's
all
like, it makes sense. And so I was like, all right, well, let's go have a booth at this pork show and pitch a product I don't have and see if there's any interest in it. Right. Like And so I did that. And there was a couple of people interested. I was like, all right. So I left Screen Feed to basically spend 9 months building this project, 6 months, and then tried to pitch it and ran into some walls. A bunch of just kind of unfortunate things happened. They canceled the next World Pork Expo, and then COVID, and all that sort of stuff. And so I eventually just ran out of money. And that's when I turned to gun and was like, hey, I need some money. So let's find a freelancing gig. Yeah, so I did that. I think it was about a year and a half that I just tried to work through that, starting my own company thing. But
I feel like that's such a integral part of being good at startups is doing your own thing for a little while, because, you can work at a startup for a decade and you're still not going to feel the urgency to get something right and to think creatively as you do when it's your own thing. So that's kind of nice that you just got it out of the way sooner rather than later. And I would assume you've got a pretty robust code base now that you can revive when the time is right, when the pork industry is ready for it.
When the pork industry is ready for it, yeah.
Well, I feel like now is kind of similar to 2010. I mean, timeline wise, a little bit different. We're probably on the cusp of a major economic situation. And in 2010, we're probably just starting to lick our wounds. But I would assume that there's probably some folks listening who are like, that's cool. I too have done computer stuff, and maybe would be interested in a junior development role. So for those folks, thinking about your experience, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, the doing random projects or doing, I've taken a couple design courses, and their suggestion was always go to a website and try and recreate that website so that you can see how other people do it and mimic, and then start to create your own style and have assets to show people that, hey, I've done this, I did this, I did this. Everyone knows usually some family member that needs something web related nowadays. And so I think they're doing pro bono work for people, and then, looking at other greats in the industry, web design wise or development wise, and trying to mimic and recreate a project that they've done, or do your own projects. Anything side related initially is, I think, a great asset to come, because there's so many boot camps now, and everyone has a 6-week boot camp degree, and how do you differentiate yourself from being a boot camp engineer, which is probably the number one easy go-to for people. And they're like, I want to start something, I don't want to go to full school, or I don't want to I'll do a boot camp or something, and I think just having additional assets to show people, I built this, I did this, or learn this from this, I think is such a great way to showcase, what you can do and what you have done.
So build your portfolio first.
Basically, because everyone wants 5 years experience or 3 years experience. And so if you can show them that you've been kind of building up your skills enough to showcase what you could do, then I think if you find the right people to contact and get through, then it's much easier to showcase yourself and show off yourself.
It also sounds like you won a lot by choosing a first couple jobs that allowed you to touch a bunch of different stuff and not be pigeonholed into one kind of cog related activity that you might be if you were a junior dev at an Amazon or some other large corporation.
Yeah. And to be fair, I would have taken anything.
That wasn't a strategic move.
It was not a strategic move. I was not picky on what I would choose. Everyone can have a different journey, I think, to it. And I think it's personality wise too. We have our work style quiz, and it's really interesting even looking at work styles on the 4 devs that we have on our team. And I can directly see the relation of how they work or how we work based on kind of what our work style shows. And I think, I'm good at a lot of things, not great at anything. And so that's my personality. Just I love to just learn and love to try new and different things. And so landing in a job where they were like, prove yourself was perfect for me because I'm like, I will learn. Like I have no problem saying in 3 months, I will absolutely learn anything I need to know or make sure I can figure out anything that you said in front of me. And so there might be people who are like, that is not me. Like if someone says, go figure it out, I'm going to be like, I don't know what to do. Just, panic. In those cases, finding a company that has a really good mentorship program, a company who, maybe someone that can pass you on. Like I think there's a whole lot of great devs out there who teach really well and bring people alongside and train them and are willing to let them fail. If you're not that personality, going to a startup type mentality where they expect a lot of you,
not the best.
and if you don't do it, you're gonna fall apart. It's like, don't do that because you're gonna then get a negative taste of development, because there's a whole lot of ways to do development and we all kind of fit in different buckets. And so I think it is good advice to find kind of that right fit for you. And sometimes you just have to take that first gig, because landing the first gig's always the hardest. And then as you continue to go on, once you're past 5 years, 8 years, your life becomes much easier in opening doors.
That's really interesting. Like, maybe the advice is take the work style assessment and go from there.
Honestly, the work style assessment's really interesting.
It is.
I almost just want to get like other devs to try it, and like people I've worked with previously, to be like, I want to see what your work style is because I feel like you're this way.
Yeah, I have people take it before I hire them on my team too. Like it applies to stuff beyond development.
And I am not trying to promote, this is not a paid sponsorship, but
and we actually don't really get anything from people taking it. It's just a cool tool and you can take it without signing up for the platform. But you just gave me a blog idea for Abby, which is pulling out roles that are best for people with a certain work style. Right? Like I hadn't thought about how, like, what's your work style?
A strong innovator.
So obviously something at a startup where you are able to touch a lot of different topic areas is great for you. This has been so interesting. I'm so glad we had this conversation. I feel like I know a little bit more about where you were before and what you do every day. So that's really helpful. If folks want to talk to you, Richie's at gun.io. So come say hey. Yeah.
Yep. RICHIE.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast powered by Gun.io. We drop 2 episodes per week, so if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and come hang out with us again next week and bring all your internet friends. If you have questions or recommendations, just shoot us a Twitter DM at The Frontier Pod, and we'll see you next week.